advocates for women and girls. Sense of all of us being part of a larger community. The many kinds of leadership, sometimes quiet leadership is something that's not recognized, but it's important to recognize that there are different kinds of leadership. Ability to bring people together in dialogue, and I think it was mentioned here, across cultures, across differences. Knowing what we know, being aware of what we know, and then maybe what we don't know. Ability to organize, ability to use the Paulo Freire method, popular education, participatory education processes that are also political, that help raise consciousness and awareness. How many people are familiar with Paulo Freire? Let's see, just, okay, so it's going to give us creativity, artistry, collaboration, being collaborative. Okay, now in leadership. Or not, maybe it doesn't. So let's just do a buzz at the table for about 5 minutes. And the question is, how does that resonate?
In terms of your rooms, things are all okay right now? Cindy's helped you? Everybody's warm?
Okay. I received it from you. I thought Ja, wie ist?
International development. And ever since you arrived on Sunday afternoon, you could feel the energy starting to come. My office is at the other end of the building, but I've been feeling the energy coming from this room. So that's really, really wonderful. And particularly, we're glad we welcomed you in the midst of the snow. Who had the most harrowing drive? I think, was it you who arrived, Eileen? Yes. So we're going to spend just a few minutes this morning talking about Coady, and I'm also going to introduce some other colleagues. David Fletcher. David is the coordinator of our overall educational programs, and he'll tell you about some of the other programs going on here. Debbie in another course on women's leadership, which she'll mention. And then two people, Tammy Bernaski, I think you've met, and Brenda, to talk about some of the other women's leadership programs. So we'll be going directly into that, so if they can make sure they're in 15 minutes or so, that's the way I think we'll do it. So it's great to have you. Great to have you. And I came, it seems like just yesterday, but it was about 18 months, almost 20 months ago. Before that, I was at a place in the UK, Institute of Development Studies at the University of Sussex. Many of you may have heard of that in development. And before that, I worked for many years at an education center engaged in civil rights struggles and other struggles in the southern part of the U.S. But before that, I was raised in Nigeria, so we must talk with the Nigerian women here. That's my home. So now I'm in Canada. But I was attracted to Coady because I had heard about it for many years, but I was attracted because it really is a very, like you, to found a very special place. And I had known about it. I had visited 20 years ago, but when they asked me to come and take a look and consider becoming the director, I was really drawn to Coady, and I wanted to say a little bit why. I've worked now, as you can tell from this gray beard, I've worked in the process of social change and community development and international development for a long time, over 40 years. And I've really come to believe that real change only happens when you put together the building blocks. Mm-hmm. It's like any other kind of building. If you try to build the roof first and there's no base, that roof's going to collapse. Mm. If you try to build a foundation for development, but you haven't laid the bottom bricks, it's going to be an unstable. So much of what I see in this international development world tries to build the roof first and doesn't take the time to put the building blocks for change in place. And what Cody believes and what I believe is those building blocks are people like you. Those building blocks are leaders who are grounded in their communities, who are striving in every way they can to make a difference. And it's not only you as individual leaders, it's leaders and their organizations. And unless we have strong leadership and strong organizations rooted in communities on the ground, then all the other attempts to bring about change from above is just going to fall on a weak structure and like putting money into quicksand. And Cody is one of the few places in the world who is dedicated to building such leadership, strengthening the leadership of people like yourselves, and strengthening the organizations of people working at the community level. And it has a long history of doing that. And it does it, I hope you're already finding it does it very well. So when I was invited to come to Cody, I said, wow, this is a place whose values I share, who has a long history, has a great staff, and works all over the world with this task, this challenge of building the building blocks for broader change. About the time that I was being considered to come, Cody had also just received a big grant to launch this new center, International Center on Women's Leadership. And Cody has always done a lot of work with women, but this is a special and a series of special programs for women's leadership. As you can tell, I'm not a woman leader, but in all my work, I've seen the difference that women leaders make. I've seen, and much research shows, that women don't just change themselves when they get active. They change their families, they change their households, they change their communities. And in many of the struggles that I've been involved in, and the projects and programs that I've been involved in, whether in the US or Canada or all over the world, the closer you are to the communities, oftentimes the strongest leaders are people like yourselves who are women. So I think, and we also know statistically, even though Cody starts with what we call an asset-based approach, not a poverty approach, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but 70% of the people of the world's poor are women. And if we are concerned about bringing about change of those who are living on the edges, if we don't change the lives of women, we're not going to succeed. And who's going to change the lives of women? It's women leaders like yourselves. So I was really delighted to come to Cody for its mission, but I was also delighted to know that a core part of its work is strengthening and working with and having the opportunity to work with and learn from people like yourselves. I was also attracted here because Cody has a long history, and David will talk a little bit more about that. But I think it's important, to me it's unique because it didn't start as an international development organization to go work in your countries. Its roots are actually trying to solve problems right here in rural Nova Scotia. In the 1920s and 30s, 60, 70 years ago, this part of Canada was amongst the communities were having a tough time. They were poor rural communities, farming communities, fishing communities, not much education, very difficult conditions. And this university was a more elite university in the middle of this area. And it was Father Moses Cody and a colleague Jimmy Tompkins and a number of others who said, as a university, we really must start doing something to work with the communities around us. And that's some 70, 80 years ago. That's when they started using, like we continue to use today, adult education methods to work with the community leaders, men and women, to think about how they could draw upon the assets of what they had to bring about change in their communities. And it started something known as the Antigonish movement. We're now in Antigonish. Can you all say Antigonish now? We are now part of the Antigonish movement. And as that movement began, David will talk more, began to focus on credit unions and cooperatives and housing and other kinds of community-led efforts, all based on people, ordinary people, coming together to discuss not only their problems, but also their assets. That is, what do they have that could help solve this problem? And it was there that Coady really developed the philosophy that is still known today, which is also makes it stand out as so unique in the international development world. So much of development, as you know, starts with what people don't have. Those women are marginalized. Those women are poor. Those women don't have it. They need our help. And as soon as we set up that, what we call deficit model, it automatically labels the people with whom we're working as people who need us, rather than labeling them as people who have assets who can bring about change for themselves. And so Father Moses Coady used to say, start with what you have in order to get what you have not. Start with what you have in order to get what you have not. Which, if you think about it, is so different than what so many of us have been taught in development, which is start with what people don't have. Start with their needs and then help them solve their needs. No. He said, everybody has assets, and no matter how small, and we can start with them and grow them. And that philosophy has been very important to Coady over those years. And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about some of that philosophy. So as the Antigonish movement grew throughout this region and spread all over Canada, people from around the world began to come to this rural area saying, what's going on in rural Nova Scotia? Why is it in this part of the world that something seems to be happening and it's being led by the people themselves? And as so many people began to come to see what was going on, they decided 54 years ago to start the Coady International Institute, which was the founding of this organization, to share this approach and this model of using education to build people's assets with people around the world. And so Coady has been to doing that in 130 countries. And when you graduate from this program, we're pleased that you will join that network. And one thing that I'm always impressed in when I travel is how once you're at Coady, you never leave Coady. That around the world, I travel and find people in key positions bringing about change. Somehow we're shaped by their experience at Coady sometime many years ago. When I decided to take the job, it was really interesting. Some of my academic colleagues said, "You're going where?" To anti-what? They didn't know of this place. But the civil society leaders, the NGOs, the grassroots organizations that I've worked with, they said, fantastic, that's where we got our start. And I learned that so many people that I've worked with over the years had in fact at one time been affected by the Coady Institute. And when I was in Nepal actually when I first decided to take the job, and immediately the word got out. The new guy from Coady is here, and we have several hundred graduates, you may know, in Nepal. Overnight they organized, and we had a big celebration. In Egypt, we have over 100 graduates now, and in the difficult times that's going on in Egypt, it's the Coady graduates who are doing a lot of leadership work. In India, over 700 graduates. In Nigeria, and most of the places from which you are. So you're continuing and building, and I hope this very important tradition that I've also come to join and to respect. Let me just jump up and say a little bit about Coady today, and then other people will say more. So Coady's still dedicated to this mission, this belief of ask. We use 3 words now. We've just written a big grant proposal, and somebody read it and said, you keep using those same 3 words. And we say, well, yes, we do, because we think they're important. We talk about asset-based change. I've already talked about that. Citizen-driven. Let's talk about that for a minute. You'll be getting more into that in the course this time. When I say citizen, I don't mean people with a passport. Citizenship doesn't start with the government giving you citizenship. Citizen starts with you as an individual who has inherent human rights in our view. And citizen-driven says that rather than think that we're going to solve these problems in the world through the government or through business or through the big international NGOs or through electoral politics, all of those are important. We say, let's turn it upside down. Let's start it with the citizens themselves, and particularly with women citizens themselves, to bring about change. So asset-based, citizen-driven, and community-led. And we use that because we also mean not just individual citizens, not just citizens one by one, but citizens who are working together in a community of people bringing value. So that's the philosophy Coady continues to bring. And we're now focusing on a number of themes that you'll be hearing about, which we think are important themes these days in the world. Some of them, it's of course women's leadership is critical, also youth and youth leadership. And there are reasons for this also. As you know, many places in the world that are facing challenges, like Egypt, where I just was. 70% of the population are under 30, and 70% of them are unemployed. So many parts of the world have really got to focus on the leadership of young people as well. But we also focus on 3 broad themes in our work, which you'll be hearing about. We use little titles for them, but one is very much starting like the anti-Yiddish movement did, starting on people's economic needs. Moses Coady said, people, let's start with the economy, because that's what people need to eat and to live with their livelihoods and survive. And so Coady has long used its approach of asset-based development to look at issues like inclusive microfinance, which Nancy has worked on a long time, and markets and livelihoods and women's-led economic empowerment and other areas. But it's not only the economy. We also now focus on a theme which we call building leadership for community resilience, and to respond to all these shocks that are happening around climate change, food shortage, loss of land and natural resources, and to use not just their economy, but their culture and their leadership and their organization to respond. And thirdly, we do a lot of work around what we call the area of sort of a democracy and citizenship. How citizens build their own role within their governments and within their states and their own institutions, including looking at peace building and conflict, which is important. So you'll hear in our programs, a lot of our courses are now based around those broad themes. And as you're here for one course for just a few weeks, you'll be meeting other people who begin coming while you're here. But except for a brief 3 weeks in July, from now until the end of December, this building will be buzzing with people from all over the world. In the last 5 years, we've had about 1,500 people from 78 countries passing through, and this year we expect between about 400 people who will come from all over the world, including the U.S., Canada, which is important. So Coady, another thing to say about Coady's work is it doesn't just work with you and your countries, but it also works in its own backyard. In the communities in Nova Scotia through our extension program, with women from indigenous communities, and you'll be hearing about that here in Canada. And will there be some overlap between this group, and so you'll get to meet some of these other women. And we also believe that this is very, very important, the opportunity to, the world, the development, international development aid and all that is divided us as the first world and the third world, or the north and the south. And I think you'll be amazed to see that we have souths in the north. We have communities in the north that also face huge issues and problems, and we can learn from you. We can learn in the north from what you're doing in your country. So over the next few months, we'll be packed with lots of people coming through, and it's always very exciting to hear people's stories and to learn from you and learn from them. And David will talk more about those programs. But our work doesn't just stop when people come here. We also increasingly work with leaders when they go back to their own countries. We can't do it everywhere. We're a relatively small staff. But in about a dozen countries now, we're doing really in-depth projects with leaders on the ground to strengthen their capacity there and their organizations there. So for instance, in Ethiopia, yes, we working with WISE, WISE, and Zambia. Who was the Zambia? Yes, and Zambia and Ghana. We're working with 3 organizations now over the next few years. In Indonesia now, in Kenya and parts of East Africa, where we're not just doing sort of leadership development and courses, but actually working with many of our graduates to help them document the new solutions that they and you will be coming up with. So much of the approaches and what works on the ground, what actually really works, is going to come from people like yourselves. And there's a real need, we think, to capture that knowledge, to work with people like yourselves to document what are you doing that makes a difference, and then how can we share that with other people in other parts of the world. Some of you said that as you went around already, just to be with such a wonderful group of women and to learn from each other. Coady likes to do that. So we do a lot of work on the ground in other countries and action research to document that. And so with this belief that through the strong leaders with new practices and innovations that are documented, that can all begin to add up and really make a difference. So we're really pleased to have you join us and to be part of this Coady history and an experiment, and also the bigger Coady network. Like I say, we hope that your next 7 weeks here will be fantastic, and that we will, the energy will continue to flow, but I know we'll continue to learn from you and be inspired by you. I told people in my previous job when I went back, I said, how do you like being at Coady? I said, it's great. I used to have to travel to visit communities to get inspired. Now I just stay here and everybody comes here. And I receive more inspiration here at Coady than any place. So we hope that you will also find it an inspiring place to be. Because I'm supposed to talk about some of the other programs.
How to organize and set up a student labor co-op for their period when they were out of school, and a couple of them. I found it so depressing, I decided to stop that. And I knew what I wanted was to know what carried part of what I do now, working in communities around the world. Another thing that's, and that meant empowering them to interact with schools and other authorities, help. Community Development Leadership by Women program. So it's a 2-week only. It attracts women from around, and they're so important to have. We have men who apply. I don't know if this program gets to people coming to some common understandings of what's going on. We look at hosting and bringing people together, like this morning. How do we approach that, and how do we give that responsibility to invite people in so they get a model for doing it at home? We are a global village, and people from Egypt and India and other places visit us without having to come here during the course. We use appreciative inquiry. John's mentioned the asset-based approach that is here, and that appreciative inquiry helps that. We use critical analysis we use a number of methods for that, and it's always to help look at what are the gender issues. Feedback, always as a way of exploring the unknown potential that women have, and have with other women. We've found that that's one of the things that is most inspiring when women come together. Learning about leading dialogue on issues of importance, things that may be very heartfelt and emotional. How do I learn to lead dialogue, speak to that with my passion, but in a way that I'm heard and not shut down or shut out of the conversations? We work on looking at research as a method of bringing new information into our organization, so we actually practice an approach to that in the 2 weeks we're together. And we develop messages that we usually post on YouTube while we're here. And one is individual messages around the passion of each woman for what she wants to do in the world. And then by the end of the course, we've been involved in that prevent them, perceptions of others and themselves, religion, and knowing that life is important as we work together. And this was we've shared with people around the world now. Today we are creating a world where our stories are.
But basically, they're from up north in Labrador, the northern parts of Canada. Métis were what we call First Nations, who married outside. They married people coming over from Europe. There is a really big lawsuit thing going through to make Métis recognized and have the same rights as First Nations. First Nations involve different communities like Cree, Sioux is Six Nations, Mi'kmaq, which is this community, Maliseet. I feel like I'm having a test here. But basically, they have certain rights through our laws, which we'll get into later. And what we do is we bring all these women together and they learn each other's struggles in their community, because there is a huge struggle in our Indigenous communities, whether they're based in Ottawa or Ontario areas, whether they're in BC, Newfoundland, Labrador, Northern Quebec, or here in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. So when we bring the women together, it's just like you. They've discovered that there's a lot of struggles that we all face. It doesn't matter where you're from, what nation you're from, what country you're from, we all face the same struggles. And it brings them together to help learn from each other, to network, and possibly find some solutions. So we basically talk about what you talk about. We talk about asset-based community development, project management, proposal writing for our case, because we have different grants that we could apply for in order to do our projects.
Change. There's that same kind of energy in all of those courses, and of course you're always welcome to come back for any of those in the future. I think sometime in the fourth or fifth week of your time here, at lunchtime we're going to have a little bit of an exhibition and a fair where you can learn more about each of the individual certificates and courses and ask people questions about them and that kind of thing. But that's sort of the diploma and the certificates, a little bit of a background. We're around for the next few weeks and can certainly answer any questions you have about these things while you're here. But I think that's all I'm going to say about that. And then there's a bit of a presentation and some discussion I wanted to have around the history that John alluded to, and kind of the foundation, the philosophy of our educational approach. So maybe I'll go to that, and others, I know if you have other commitments and you don't want to stay, this might be your time to escape. So thank you all very much, and it's great having you around. Here for the people here, to learn things that will make a difference for their lives. And that was how the university started. It was very small initially, it grew over the years, but one of the most significant parts of its growth was in the early part of the 20th century. Some of the people at the university started to realize we talk about this as a people's university, but we're really just teaching the classics and teaching English and teaching physics and teaching things that every other university teaches. And is it really making a difference in people's lives? For the farmers, for the fisher people, for the people working in the coal mines. It's the kind of education they're learning here valuable in their lives. And it was at that time the extension department of St. Yvette's University was developed. And they started thinking, what do we need to do differently to support those people?
It's relevant to our course at this time. We will achieve respect for the dignity of all persons through social reform when everyone is able to live a full and abundant life. This word is meaningful for us and it's relevant for us. For example, change in one community is a community development work. We believe that this is a reformation, you know. It is the same with reformation. And I give an example of my hometown area. How can I start this organization, you know? Now I'm a leader in my in my home area. Before, in my area, I'm living in a small village called, a small rural village called Didinto. Every people cannot permit a woman to education, or they have no respect for the woman even. Women, they saw the woman as a good. They believe that there is no any power in a woman. They said that woman is a weak person. She's undermined by the men. So when I've seen this, every time I have, you know, a wish to learn, to change this community, to transform this community, to change the situation that I found in my community. You know, they don't respect. Even the women have no dignity within that community. So I'm the youngest girl for my family, and I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters. My father sent my 2 brothers to school, and the 3 girls are just married. Lastly, I asked my father, please give me a chance for education. I said for my father, and he said, "Oh, you are just going to destroy our culture." You know, what if women learn what she can get? Nothing. Woman is just for what? For marriage. So you are not doing good. They are not respecting me, you know? So I become here, you know? Just do what you like, he said. And I tried, I find there are so long history, but I won. When I graduated grade 12, I became a teacher. I was serving as a teacher for 6 years. At that time, I came to my community and just start to, you know, activities, you know.
And it sounds like this respect the dignity of all persons
Yes.
was very important to you and was motivational to you in your work.
Yes. So I start to do that one. After that, I start to give on 2 videos. They start to send girls to the school.
Great,
You know?
congratulations.
Yeah, I'm very happy for that.
We don't have a chance to do that. But I think as we go through, as you go through the experience of the next 6 weeks, some usefulness to this kind of a principle. Did anyone have it?
David, maybe you can tell us in what way that this principle.
Basically, related to the statistics, like we read somewhere that about 80% of the world's population, they consume on 20% of the world's population. That when people, they have the basic needs, then they are more likely to give respect and dignity to other persons. But when their basic needs, like they don't even have any place to live or when they don't have anything to eat, then there's that's when people actually, you know, start doing things that they shouldn't they shouldn't do. So that's basically what we thought about abundant in our group.
Anyone else? What does that
achieve through social reform? When we talk about reformation, we talk about transformation, getting to the root and coming out with doable action to solve the problems of the society.
So this one is also other components of your life equally important. The economic is there, but there's also the social, there's also relationships, there's also the cultural, there's also how you spend leisure time and enjoy. Some of our aspirations and expectations need to be tempered, is motivate people just to think about these things. And if you say this is relevant to you,
we brought the discussion into two. We had the social and economic part of it discussed separately and then mixed together.
Because where I come from, there are so many interventions, there's so many organizations, there's so many young people with so much passion that have started very powerful interventions, great ideas, but they don't last even 6 months or more. Why? Because like when there's a women's movement that started in my country, if the men are not on board, it's just the truth. Without male involvement in my country, then that intervention is utilized. Then when you get down to the root cause of why a rural woman is not going to go and probably use an IUD or implant, then here, was there or is there like a gender disparity?
No, I think that's a very good insight. You know, sometimes people can assume, and these principles were written by a man, right? He said person here, right? And he said community here. But in the back of his mind, was he thinking of men? And was he thinking of a group of men that came together? And maybe to make it very clear, right, if we wanted to take a principle like this forward, we might say group action is natural because the potential of every man, woman, boy, and girl can only be fully realized, in some form of relationship with the diversity of men and women of different socioeconomic classes, different castes, different sexual orientations, different abilities, right? We could unpack what community means, and we could unpack what person means, and it might make this questions about this, I think, is very powerful. And we can do that in other ways as well. So I'm very appreciative of the way you've interacted with these.
We call that School of Living Tradition, wherein children dance, sing, and learn the history of their nation. So in that way, they get to learn more about.
Personally, I believe this is relative. It depends on the priority of each country.
Okay.
So when you look
Can
at
we hear?
Inequitable distribution of wealth, illiteracy, and all that stuff. And for some areas, they would think that that would be the focus of education, and we use that in order to address these economic problems. But we would say that it's not the economic.
Back at home, there is no really relevant in the economic sense. Like everything is really related to reading, writing, and words and all that. But then we did a survey with 20 herders, 20 parents, because the nomadic education is a big challenge worldwide, not only in Tibetan society.
Education is the most important things for social change. Without education, people can't know anything to their life, and education make knowledge and information, and the information and knowledge makes people's attitude, and attitude is the very important things to learn. The social, economic, and political, everything is depends on person's attitude. So to be a good attitude, to enhance the good attitude, education is the very important things for the person and his or her attitude. So
and I don't know if that really meant when our founding father created those values.
Yeah. And I think it's another very important point.
The person has talents and attitudes which are to be nurtured and celebrated. So this principle is a very relevant to both of our projects, as our project value the principle of a participatory one. All of them during the process of our project, from the design of a project, the running of the project itself, you include the participation of our target groups. And we do believe that each person has already a part of the solution that needs to be supported. And our project is much more effective and successful if we value this aptitude of those target groups, and it will be much more acceptable.
Thank you.
In as much as we are not opposing the government of our nation, we believe that this is our space. This is where we can talk and be listened to. Likewise in the community, they believe that it is with us that they can have ideas, be celebrated, unlike the government, that there are so much bureaucracy, and in the long run, we all...
No. Take one for
It's not a
yourself.
fortune cookie.
Yes, it is kind of a fortune cookie, because you will find the one you get is very special and very relevant for you. Share it with others around your table and see if it makes sense for you.
Tosin, what your code?
So you're giving this one back to me.
Which language is this? Of all the ages and all the riches yet concealed, all the findings of science and philosophy are theirs, all the creation of art and literature. Have gratitude.
Your background is very bad. The toilets as a background? What? You take as a background the toilet, the bathroom.
Yeah.
There is a background.
You come here before. Yeah, you can. You want? Yes. 1, 2, 3, start. You introduce Cody.
Cody. They say this is the extra hours. I have to rearrange my bag upstairs.
How do you feel?
I feel food eating.
Chocolates, girl.
You are going to give me the picture.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
My check and then my passport.
That's okay.
Not the
Yeah,
same.
because the, yeah.
Thank you.
That way. Keep heading that way. Oh, do it, listen, we have to cover.
The best is to jump. What's your feature? Yes. Oh yeah, my very nice.
But I want the building, the background to show.
Hi. Pop.
Oh, that's gonna be fun. Are you gonna take a picture of her? Yeah. I'm gonna throw a snowball by her. Get ready to catch a snowball. Okay.
Yeah. What? Hi, guy. Where we go?
Yeah, we're going to the bank to get our money. Yay!
And to shop.
And to see more of the town.
Okay.
Yeah, Main Street. And this is the town.
Wave your hand.
Underscored how important they were to the movement.
Yes.
And how interesting that in itself is.
Yes. So you were called to be involved in the new extension department way back in the early 30s. And she was, our library is named after her because she was our first librarian. And she was also the first field worker, hired women field worker. And within her first year of working, she, in addition to getting the library up and running, started over 300 women's study clubs. So she was very busy. And, this was long before Facebook. This was, getting out into
Good old organizing.
Good with women. Starting with their interests. So they would go and say, what are you interested in? So a lot. the things that were relevant to women in rural communities, but that was just a stepping stone to leadership. And they had greater goals than that. And so the Sisters of St. Martin.
It's just so amazing how, I mean, we tend to think that we are all alone to help them have a sustainable human development work. I work as a finance manager. I think the approach that Coady takes in education, which is participatory,
established, and how Father Moses Coady started all of this, and how committed individuals and try to make a change for the country.
Local NGO in Ethiopia. Our focus is just integrated rural development program, especially where we
borrow for a couple of days so everyone can share it and make sure that we all have access to it. In fact, I think Kathy, we've already, Nancy Miller's been.
The political and civic leadership handbook. You see that in your list. This is
and copies of. You can do that. These computers are also connected to that for printing. A number of people have already discovered that, but if you need to print assignments or finding things online that you want to print off. If you want to ask some topics you're interested in, we're happy to suggest them to you. You are welcome to borrow them, to take them to the residents. If you're wondering what to do on these cold, snowy evenings.
Our planning, so out of, we have gotten 12 full scholarship, the CETA is also supporting, so all people. And so what that means for us is these are some of the...
Probably not, no. And then they're not involved in the mentor program. They'll be talking countries who just happen to be in the same area. The intent is not, it's all done through distance connection. Yes.
There might be a few of them that are in the Toronto area that we would have included in the event. So yeah, there's a chance for some, but not all.
And not all donors will be
The reports and if you and I wanted I know something put out the token of appreciation. If that wasn't something from CETA to attend the event too, which would be another. So we'll do our best to make sure you
Thank you.
Because here for 6 weeks. We know a couple are not going to be able to attend. I can put out the request if they have a little video, like a little testimonial that you record and that we give to them. So we'll do whatever we can to make sure you have a chance.
That's not garbage, it's compost. So in the bathrooms, when you wash your hands and that goes in the bin, we ask you don't put garbage in that, like from the hall or from something else, thinking that because it's in the bathroom in the can that's garbage. It's not. It's compost. So each stream has to stay clean. So you can't mix the two. If you mix any of them, it automatically becomes garbage because we don't stream it after it's collected. The way we collect it, it carries that way right out to the curb and then off to the waste station. So if it gets contaminated, we don't sort, it stays right through. So a lot of product that could be either paper or recyclables or metals or plastic, if it gets contaminated, it automatically becomes garbage. So
Peter, that's good to,
but it's only at Coady. Everywhere else on campus, 4 streams. Refundables and recyclables is all the same because it's all recyclable. So that's just one thing to for paper towel in the washrooms.
manure? Oh, right. Decomposes. So for us, we mean like banana peel.
So it's Benjamin Sabugo. So we'll just say congratulations. I don't know what's the best way to say it. Congratulations, Benjamin Sumugoy, for what? I'm sure my father will be. Thank you so much.
But I talked to somebody up on the 3rd floor, and she said, I haven't heard it yet, so you need to wander up there and share your energy all over the building. To say, introduce a couple of people. know her better than we because you've gotten to spend 3 days with her already. But we're delighted that Eileen has recently joined women's leadership and women's citizenship and women's rights, and will be helping us build our work. And I had the opportunity to work together many years ago at Highlander and in Nicaragua, other places. And also Cindy, where's Cindy?
When I was 5 years old, Cody was an inspiration to me as a person. I came back to be president of the university about 17 years ago, and I felt I had to do something with Cody. So I am the slaves of Jean there. They just asked me to do everything I can. But one of the special things is having grown up in philosophy with Cody, I know all the great achievements that are being found.
I work with an organization in Mindanao wherein we support the peace negotiating and conflict resolution. I'm so happy to know that we are 16 out of the, how many? 1,000.
This young team that goes out and stages plays. We've done flash mobs before. I think it's like so cool. And it's so interesting when you find another way of spreading a message. So that really excites me, and that's one of the things that I do. And then I also started my own organization. It's like so new.
Any opportunity comes your way, take it. So I took it, and I'm here. Yeah, I was the head of the congregation I belonged to. I'm a Catholic nun. For 12 years, 2 terms, and during this it was at diploma level for the last 45 or so. So
thing I know is that there is a huge explosion and that there are dead bodies all around and there is blood, and I've experienced more of that. So in these circumstances, what I could do as a young girl of 23 years of age is that I could have given up, or I could have, I could do something which could, not just me, but it could help other young people to actually raise a voice against what they feel is wrong and it shouldn't be this way. So that's why I started a project called The Voice of Youth. It aims to give the young people a voice so that they are able to just come up on this platform and talk about anything which is of importance to them. So well, that's basically my introduction, and just being here is like a dream come true for me, because I feel I'm always in the pursuit of learning, and in this university setting and seeing how things work here, it's just brilliant. And thank you for providing me with the opportunity.
Health mortality rate in Africa and second highest in the world. So what we do is that we work in the rural areas where 80.2 million women live and are agents to the women in the villages. If for the cities, we don't have so much problem of inadequate health care, but we have the problem of to victims of medical negligence. So we have cases of mother and child dying, family wants to sue.
So if anyone wants to learn skate, to skate, and exchange for dance lessons. A couple of years, and I know there have been some nice connections with the community, so I was thinking, I need to introduce her to her, and I need to introduce her. We have a social media guru who lived in Pakistan for a while, so I was thinking, Denise, you have to meet, and then with a community partner for Bridget, who's a good friend of mine, and I know said she'd love to meet you, Joyce. So it's kind of nice to kind of make some of those connections. So I'll be inviting them to some of the events.
I did play in a chamber orchestra in Toronto at one point. I won't play for you now. I'm in practice. I
spent 2 years teaching in Nigeria, and I was reminded of my time there when last week Chinua Achebe passed away. And for all of you aspiring writers, he was a real inspiration.
I'm just thinking, while you were adjusting to all this snow last weekend, I was out celebrating in the snow because I like to get out on my skis and snowshoes, so I was out enjoying the snow.